shoulders, I think, to do some different work than maybe what we were focused on. And in year one that I was in the role, I noticed I asked for some things. They actually threw on a new word at the end of my name, or my title, which was Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. That's what Dana was, and I got and Educational Accountability. Okay, I don't know where that came from. It was just there, but it was It was a piece that I thought of, and I thought, okay, what is it to be accountable? I was hearing things in year one about our board saying, Ryan, reading's terrible, which then I'd be like, reading's terrible, or our reading scores, or our reading achievement. It's like, you're not saying just actually reading's terrible, is it? But that was the phrase. Or different pieces about where we're at. And you get kind of the fresh version of things. I asked at that time to collect. I knew that in the district that we were doing school improvement planning. I asked at that time for all principals to send me their school plans for the year so I could see where they were at. It was a very innocent request because I really wanted to know where we were at, and I didn't get any. And then I was like, okay, A, they didn't get my email. B, that's isn't how this is going to work. I'm not going to ask for something to get it. And I didn't think that C actually existed, so I didn't have a C at the time. And then in slowly digging in, I noticed that C didn't exist. And C was basically a strong district system of goals, or looking at achievement data, or looking at having some sort of consistency. I saw binders everywhere. I saw books everywhere. I saw stuff we were doing, and I saw a lot of hard work, but I didn't have a piece to see it. So I'm giving kind of a long story behind this. That was pretty telling. And I noticed that this office in particular, this building, was either the blame of things, or was called upon to fix things, or was, I don't know, just working really hard, but I didn't see things that were becoming sustainable. And so at that point, Sarah Barron, I talked to Sarah about it, and Sarah and I reached out to Joe Schrader, who's a good friend of mine and a good professional. He had just taken on a new role at Austin. I said, Joe, I need you. Let's just sit back. He was a superintendent of the year in Muskego. He has a great background, and I got and we just talked about, like, well, where are we at process-wise, and what are the challenges that we're facing, and what are some things. We just slowly put a starter roadmap together, and that really was following just some process, like being really clear about some things we needed to see, and having a process to see it through with the goal of having something grow. So Sarah and I did that alone in our office, and just kind of got it going. We have had some hires and different team members come and go throughout that time. And I asked Joe that summer, I said, Joe, can I go to the SAIL training and just sit in? We weren't ready as a system to go do that. I just want to sit in the back and just take notes. So I did, and and it kind of deepened my thinking a little bit more on where Waukesha was and what we could try to do as a system. Our school board doesn't regularly ask for achievement data or processes, or we're not in a Baldrige process or that. And the culture that we currently even have across our system isn't really that. So I thought, well, I can't go on my own, but I can do something locally at CNI. So we did some quarterly meetings for the first time 2 years ago, and I brought an example of that. So at that time, I just asked, I started my own with Sarah, and we just said, what are some things we need to see that we're just on fire? And it was everything from, were there goals, and did you have a goal? We didn't even care what it was at the time. How were you using the vision of excellence, which is a term people were kind of not using? How would we prepare for educator effectiveness? What did Waukesha 1 look like in your building? Did you have a safety? We had things like, do you have a safety plan for your building? We had very just stuff. A lot of it, some of it didn't even have to do with CNI, but some of it had to. And so we tried to title it like improvement processes or optimal conditions and student achievement. So what it did was it exposed kind of like, I remember this moment where we were asking for goals, and I'll use names so we'll make it real. Our first quarterly meeting, first of all, they were in the summer, and I went to it, and the first building I got to, the person wasn't even there. The principal wasn't even there. And then the principal came like half hour later. Oh, I got what? And I got one of these, like, oh, that's today, and like no prep, and like I was like, okay, so I really got a lot of work to do on like. So it was, I'm sharing this as this is probably what you're going to go through as we start to get to, or you're going through. Then I slowly, when I went to a second building that day, because we had and I got someone that had thought about it and actually kind of outline talking points for each thing. I was like, okay, so now I've got this going. I went to another building and another building, and it was a great first quarter of these. By round 2, we had learned a little bit more. And by round 2, it says like bring a plan. And I remember prior to this, Jason Sadowski, we were in a middle school meeting. He put a plan on the table. And I remember 3 other people, maybe in his team, that didn't put a plan on the table. And it was kind of like, okay, Jason was new to the district at the time, and it was kind of like that was a part of his culture he was a part of. West Allis had plans, they had processes, and our culture was maybe like we kind of did, but we didn't do them. When I was like, all right, game on, because about a month later, I had actually 4 plans on the table because it had been established like that was how you did it. And I knew behind the scenes over that month, he had shared that, and people had looked at it, and it wasn't like, but then the plans started mirroring each other. So year 1 on a process, I'm just going to explain, was pretty trying. But it established that we're going to check up on some things, and there's some things that are important to do. I had very low-hanging fruit because it was really about connecting with people and try to make it as safe as we could. Year 2, we built our first sale team in the district, and I took people that found a way to navigate. You can see this is Butler's. They found a way to navigate success. Green is good to go. Okay. And that sale team includes people like Jason, Jody, and Mary Velez, some different principals in our system that were hitting the mark repeatedly. We went to the sale training this past summer, and really it was sale training comes down to 4 things: problem identification, theory of action, 100-day planning processes, and checks. And this is really the end part of it, is you're checking to see if these things are in place. And the we said, okay, well, of all the problems we could identify, which there was a lot, we said, let's try to narrow what's the most important thing our system should do, literacy, or as our department, how are we going to do this? Let's build a literacy focus team. Let's talk about what did we want to see. And as a result of that, that team came up with some brainstorming of a theory of action, which I've read repeatedly too many times, so I don't have to say it again. But it was about, all of a sudden it came across as we had 5 things that we needed to see in our system for literacy leadership, which was a clear articulation of a school improvement plan or goals, a clear definition of some key high leverage practices in your school, a clear models of how you're going to grow those practices, how do you support people, a piece of how you're going to actually monitor and give feedback and see if things are working, in a way about data communication. These 5 came from some longer discussions, but it came from, this is a far cry from the first year, which was like, it's more organized. It was like, this is about literacy. This is about 5 leadership things that we felt were important. We kind of created that sentence off of this, which was, everyone in our system should be able to know where they're trying to go, or what goals they have for achievement, or what vision they're working within. Everybody should have a couple of key practices that they're doing to try to reach their goal in their classroom, whether you're at Summit View, whether you're at West, whether you're in the World Language Department, whether you should have a couple of key things that you feel confident in. We felt like everybody should have a professional development plan that they're a part of, and that they're either have choice in, or that they're learning, or a place to go to build skills repeatedly. Or we said everybody should have a way to monitor progress. If you're a teacher, how are your kids doing, and are you really able to monitor? If you're a principal, how's the building going with adoption of certain things you'd like to see? And as a system, we should be able to see kind of where we're at. And then last but not least is data and results. Like, are we communicating out large scale data and pieces? So we came up with these 5 this year, and we've been challenged to bring some of these to life. And in some areas, we're on year 2 of plans, and the plans are actually fantastic. You're starting to see consistency and sharing. High leverage practice, we started the year, so this is going to be a challenge this year, because everyone went, what's going to happen this summer? People are sharing some key things. That was kind of where it's at. So we went into that piece. I'm sharing this background just so you have an understanding of what we're trying to do. Our goal was to get a chance to hear from sites how they were bringing these things to life. And we've shifted these meetings, these quarterly meetings, that you've seen some of them, you've been a part of some of them, that it's no longer, it took about 1.5 years, but it's no longer about, are we checking up on you and you don't know the dates and you're kind of doing it. And it's kind of more along the lines of, here's our focus, here's our practices, here's how we're growing them. Here, and we're sort of in the people are doing it stage now, and we're moving into a new stage about quality. And actually, as we go into our sales year 2 of sales this summer, we're going to keep the same framework. We're adding maybe some more detail in here, what it might look like. But actually, the new phase we're getting to is it's going to be impossible to get green unless you can show evidence of either increased student achievement or increased changes in practice, things like that. And that's going to be a new challenge for us as a team when we work with our principals, because they're going to have some data organized to be able to, they're going to have progress monitoring that's beyond I did 20 walkthroughs and into here were my first 20 walkthroughs over the last 3 months. Here's what we noticed, kind of what Mary Velez shared kind of a month ago. And then here's what we're doing as a result of it now. And here's how I saw a change in practice or a new level. So I'm sharing some of that as a background of what we're going to talk about with your role. Because in many ways you're doing the same thing that I described with your team or your department, but you have kind of each other to kind of look at what do we want to have in common, what kind of approach. So when Jody got a chance to step in and join us, I'm sorry, I'll close here one more second. Finally, this is our kind of quick draft for next year, 15, 16. You can see we've been taking time to kind of talk about what key indicators would look like. It's based off of what we're seeing now. Somebody said, well, a 3 of 2 years ago is nowhere close to what a 3 is this year, which will probably be nowhere close, but exactly, because we're doing it based off of a readiness level. If we'd have just said, everybody turn in a plan with your data dashboard and clear progress monitoring tools, we'd have been so far out from where the reality of the work was that we'd probably lost people. But as a result, we've got of this work, one of our targets for ourselves is to get a data dashboard going. I'll be happy to say that it's now live. We actually have a homepage. We actually have data filled in. We'll be sharing it next week. We actually have one. So now we can start to talk about what does that mean, but buildings don't yet. And so you'll see things slowly emerge, but it kind of keeps us on point and not on point. Sales is coming up again this summer. And last but not least, we're going to be, like I said, we're going to be updating this. The final page of this is that call survey. We're going to be taking it at ILT again next week. As a team, we took it last year. Some people are like, oh, it's just some questions I'm answering. This year, we're going to get to a new stage, which is the same questions. But what?
I'm trying to think. Probably one person.
Maybe one person took it. Don't. Either way, it's a call about leadership. It's a survey about leadership, I'll call. And basically, it's a comprehensive assessment of leadership for learning. But it gets into 9 domains and it actually asks, like, how well is your system leading vision? How well is your system using data? How well is your system? So it'll be I'll dig into that for a second, but we're actually progressing in kind of the big picture plan. So back to the sentence, which was what I had said is big picture for me is if every teacher in our system, I knock on any door in any classroom and I had 5 questions to ask them, I would hope to have a confident answer that had some sort of sync, which is those 5 yellow pieces. What are the goals or what are you trying to achieve as a part of being in here? Whether it's in a science classroom, whether it's a 2nd grade math classroom, whether it's wherever. What are the key practices you're bringing to life in this school or in this classroom? How are you growing those practices? Or who's in your network? Kind of that whole thing, like how are you learning it? Because I wanted to move beyond just like I attend the PD dates. I mean, it's kind of like that they own it. If I were to ask a principal these same 5 questions, like, what is the overall goal and vision of this school? What are some practices I'm going to see as I walk up and down the hallways? What does your culture of learning look like here? What are you monitoring this next couple of months in terms of what's happening? Where's your school been in terms of data? And I'd ask the same of all of us. So if I came to your desk and stole cookies and asked you, Dan, what's the goals for math department? What are some key practices you'd want me to see or you want to see when you walk in down the hall and going into math classrooms? What's the PD plan for your team? What are you monitoring or what are you looking at achievement-wise or practice-wise? And then lastly, you have your own dashboard that you've been able to, if Barbara Zink called you or your math team could kind of say, yep, here's where we're at. And that's kind of the big picture story. So when I said to Jody, I said, one of your primary jobs is to, in working with principals, is to help them tell that story. And another primary job is to help this team figure out how are we going to approach that type of work. I don't know when the time is. It's probably getting, the more we're here, the longer it's on our shoulders. But I'm trying to think which principal's been in each building the longest. I don't know. Bonnie. Well, she's
even not in the building.
But she's been in that building 5 years, 6 years. Let's just use Bonnie for a second.
Right.
So if she's been there the longest, is it safe to assume that the practices that are happening at Hillcrest mirror Bonnie's vision or leadership? But Courtney's been there a year. So then you could say, well, do the practices necessarily mirror Courtney's vision or leadership? Well, you'd say, well, a year is a tough time to kind of get a culture, but 5 in the leadership role, maybe. Or think of each of you in your role. Dan, 7 months. So if I'm walking down the hall at South and I see 6 math classrooms, I wouldn't say, wow, that's going to mirror kind of what Dan has been leading for work. I'd be thinking, what is Rick and Stephanie's only been there a year, or Tim, like what's leading that department? What I hope to get to it through this work, really on a big picture, is at some point we do this work clear enough that it starts to have that tone that you're able to say, like, Dan's just like, hey, I'm going to West today to look at math classrooms, and I'm there, and we can quickly say, you can say, look, here's where we've been at with the dashboard. Here's kind of some of the goals we have as a department. Here are 2 or 3 practices you would see. And eventually it becomes kind of your team. Like, it eventually becomes a building in terms of what the practices look like. So that's kind of the big intro. And what we want to talk about today is questions about what that means for each of you, questions about how do we begin that work and how do we start. I purposely brought the initial startup one, which was really bad, because I try to share the storyteller sometimes, but to try to share the story of like what I was seeing and what I was trying to make sense of, but where I was trying to go on a big picture. And then Brian and I talked about this last week a little bit about Waukesha. One, like he was feeling, I'll speak for you, but he was feeling like, okay, we're in this new phase now, we're done deploying, but are they working in the way we need them to work? He felt, I heard, sense a lot of like ownership on that, and like kind of like also like like urgency behind it and a need for support. So it was kind of like, if I asked, Erica's not here today, but Erica, I went to 10 classrooms today in science. What are a couple of things that you would think that I would hope that I would see? Mm-hmm. Eventually that's going to become like, and if I came to her, let's say I saw everybody sitting at desks taking notes and no labs in action, and let's say I hit 20 science classrooms. Is that your vision of science, or is that a culture vision at a school that we got to start to talk about? Mm-hmm. Is that the principal's vision of that school? Is that, or not? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but that's the stuff that we want to work through, which is part of like part 1, that goal and vision. If we walk in and we see some high leverage practice, let's say we're seeing a ton of in terms of, let's just take world language for a second, in terms of high leverage practice, let's say we're just seeing a ton of teacher talk, and we're going into those classrooms and a ton of note taking. Maybe Sharon, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know, I'm not saying right now. Is that the vision? Yeah, it's good. Is that the vision? Or is the vision for the department like, most of our classrooms, or most of the lessons of the week, we want to see at least a 50-50 ratio of student talk to teacher talk, or an 80-20, and you're looking at like, but the question would be is, have we established some of those things? In terms of PD, are we waiting till the 13th and the 12th and 13th, or do you say, nope, I have a rolling tide and here's what it looks like? I have Jamie, I get your stuff on Friday. I have an ongoing blog that keeps people informed, or I have a chance that we're meeting at TDPs, or we have a small group spread out all over doing some of this kind of really close custom work, as well as some big picture things. So that's kind of where these questions would eventually be, is what is your story? And I don't want it to be a moment of huge stress, because I mentioned our process of finally getting to talk about some important things, and it took 2.5 years. And I was in a position to be able to kind of demand it versus, the time when you're coming in, you're kind of in a position of trying to form some connections and relationships, and how do I get at the table at this school, and how do we do that? So I'll try and stop talking now, because I threw a lot at you, but I'd love to kind of figure out, what does that storyline mean for you? Does it make sense? What would you customize on your own or not? How can Jody and I help support it or clarify?
I have a quick question. I guess I'm curious your thoughts on sales process. So we have a systemic reality of so I would imagine you progress. You can't be at a place where you're constantly resetting those and in the direction. How do you deal with that? Like, if I take the new job tomorrow and I walk out of here, and the vision that I put in place becomes, I mean, first of all, just having a vision, this structure, I get that, right? That's like, that somebody doesn't come in and go, this is way too open, and change direction, and then, you know, like, just
So
curious.
that's my, I'll put Mike Leach on the spot. Mike Leach, or anyone, came into our district at one point, had never been a part of the Grading for Learning conversations. Okay, that would be any height rank, pick anyone. Or hadn't been a part of some of the pre-work 2 or 3 years before in the planning for STEM, or hadn't been a part of maybe a couple of it. So basically, I have to assume that none of the work that we've ever done is ever going to exist beyond the day that we do it, unless we have a process for that. So part of that work, you walked in, did Erica leave you with a dashboard, a vision? I mean, I'm not going to pick on Erica, but that was just not part of our culture in our district to leave that. Right now in my office, my first thing I did, I have these stupid binders, and I had to have them physical, but because every building now, I have 3 years of their school improvement plans. And one of the challenges everyone's going to get this June is, so what's different between these 3? What's the same? You need to build some consistency around some processes. The school improvement plan, your data dashboard, because I can't imagine, what I'm hoping is that if there's a strong data dashboard that you're making decisions off of, there's a strong plan that you can follow, that anyone could be able to come in and go a totally different direction right off the cuff, unless it was a total disaster, but I don't see that right now. Or that somebody wouldn't have an inroad to be able to say, what about this or this? But I think right now we're so vulnerable. We're vulnerable to turnover, we're vulnerable to, you know, people in leadership roles changing. Does that change everything? I've heard that, like, oh, we're going to need a new person, what are we going to do? When it really should be someone new is joining us, they should get a chance to look at what we've been doing, and they have a rich history of looking at 2 or 3 last, and they can be a part of strategically changing it. So
I mean, I want to add to that too. I think I agree that we would have been more susceptible in the past, simply because we didn't have goals driving decision making, nor did we look at data to drive decision making. But to me, once those bookends are in place, that leadership vision should continue no matter who takes over in anybody's role. So that's what I've seen. I mean, even from a principal perspective, our SIP, or in essence our goals, have been the same with tweaks for like 2 years, and it will continue next year when I'm not there. Becky's not going to say, oh, we're doing something different. No, the data still tells us this. The vision is this. The teacher ownership has bought in, so we'll just kind of continue that course. I don't, the work we do is so complex, I don't think any of us will necessarily arrive on the goals that we have set. But the data should show that we are making achievement gains and making growth gains. So, like I said, I think in the past we would have been highly susceptible, simply because, to that point, we came in with no math vision, no math data, at least easily accessible, and so all that, just falls with the wind.
That becomes a part of the situation.
we're hoping.
Right.
But there's a challenge in and of that itself. We're hoping that our cluster sharing is building a little bit more cohesion in how people are sharing these out now, and it's not just each building operating alone. There's always that transition piece. I worry about it a lot with teachers. Like, is the building culture that strong? So let's pick on a teacher. If a math teacher gets hired at South, and a math teacher gets hired at Butler, and a math teacher gets hired at what? Are we leaving it up to that teacher to come in with a strong skill set and survive? Or are we providing them with a foundation or a platform to operate off of that says, this is kind of how we do business? And I've seen it with Waukesha 1. You have different waves because there was different readiness. Or if we hire somebody coming in, are they coming in understanding, like, this is the culture for iPads in this building, and we're going to help you get up to our culture, and we recognize there's going to be a learning curve, but it's not going to be about whether you like it or don't like it. It's not like same with Grading for Learning. We have a big challenge with that, and part of our work that we're going to do with Grading for Learning, why they're going officially to SAIL this summer, is to legitimately put in key look-fors. Our first year is going to look very nuts and bolts, like, do you have it written in every syllabus, how you're going about this? Do you have parent sessions every couple of months to help parents understand the scale? And eventually it might lead to away from some of those type of communication basic things into, can you ensure that in your school you have these couple of practices? Yes, going to start with that. And I think we're going to start to craft some of those because that's kind of in our head. That's what we're trying to get to, which is, it might be with your department the same thing. Like, Does your department team use a common Blackboard site, or are you reviewing the syllabus from each team member just to know that there's at least something consistent? And it's kind of that whole framework of at least getting people into the field, and eventually that might lead to, are we ensuring that, I'm going to keep picking on science, but is there a lab that goes with every learning?
You said you were going to click on them too.
Yeah. So no, but those are the questions, and honestly, I feel like I'm pushed a lot to move faster, a lot from every department, everyone I talk to here. And I always feel like I'm not trying to intentionally drag my feet, but I always watch this cycle go back, and then I always feel like I'd rather have a foundation of quality we can operate off of and let really good people work off of that. Then sometimes I felt like this system went really fast and did a lot of things quick with this team here, but it wasn't built on like taking time to get some things going. And so I struggle with that. And I think you might too. You have some high flyers in your department that are ready to go, and hey, there's this neat thing to do and we want to do it. But part of this is, Joe Schroeder uses the term, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. When I looked at what we were at in terms of literacy in this district, we didn't have anywhere where the achievement was up. Right? We didn't have goals. We didn't have anywhere where data was consistently being referred to. We waited until it hit Freeman for whatever reason to react. We didn't have ongoing professional development that people could be a part of 24/7. That was for grading, for learning, or literacy. But we had all this other stuff going on. We had Bedazzle classes for this, and there's an app for that. But yet you'd ask teachers, like, they'd say, well, I went to Trailblazer training 6 years ago for math, or they did that 2 years ago, but they didn't, or I was hired late, so I didn't get that. So those are some foundational things we had to say, let's back way up. And, there wasn't money for a lot of that either. So we said, well, we have to stop spending this. We have to start spending that foundation. And that's a hard balance to find, but going through some of that.
So pull up the report chart, if you will, that I sent you, and click on that coordinator tab, and just because Ryan keeps talking through the context of those leadership principles, but take a look in the work that you've done already this year. Many of you in your first year, as I kind of mentioned before Ryan came in, you have started to develop your vision for world languages, your theory of action for humanities. So you've started to develop this with your teams if they weren't already in place. Last week we talked about that high leverage practice piece, and we said, what does success look like? What is your vision of learning? If we were to ask you, Rachel, I walk down the F100 hall at West, what am I expected to see when I walk? And granted, we might not be there yet, but this is the vision of where we need to be. So I want you guys, we want you to look at that now and see, does this leadership cycle make sense? You feel like you're doing it? Is this the first time you're sort of seeing it, digging in, or where? I'd just like to hear your feedback on that. Just with the process of L1 through 5.
I have one more thing to be thinking about it real quick. Those 5 things, I believe, are like high leverage leadership practices to think about. What's below it, I always feel is fair game. That was a piece I learned between year 1 when we didn't have this there in year 2. Yeah. Right. How you bring that practice to life about establishing a goal or a vision is, but being able to do that, to say I was able to help more people establish a vision or a goal or a plan, or the same with the second one. No matter what it is one thing, but the fact that you can talk about, we establish a time of doing this, or to grow others, the PD one, or to know your role in monitoring. Those are pieces I took from some coaching with Joe, but also from Jim Ricklebaum, who was talking about, what is your impact you have on a system and the role that I said that I'm in, or a role that you guys would be in. And if it's to get your system to keep the most important work, or think about the most important, that's why those are there. So just so you know where they came from too. Boxes below are really up to interpretation on how you get there. But those, being in a leadership role, those are some big 5 things to be able to do. Some do take time to get there, but otherwise our day's filled with tasks, and we can lose sight of what's the guiding star of the task.
I think when
As a coordinator team? Okay.
Right. I'm looking at the qualified as well, and it's based on how yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I remember having a conversation with Steve about how that felt like coordinators like this teamwork, and then they felt like the other work. And I'm wondering if this provides another touch point to bring that all into them. So the work isn't, we make an example of that, but I mean that the work that everyone does is around this versus you have your this particular work that you do and then you do this stuff. I think that there's some context on it. And so remember that being part of the conversation. Maybe this is a chance to kind of reframe that and see what all we're doing. Like going to curriculum with figure somewhere versus doing that other stuff you do. Or I might have a figure within this framework versus doing that other thing.
Well, and I look at it right from a principal lens of like, everyone's thinking about this, you know, ours revolves around literacy. And there's high leverage things we're doing that directly correlate to literacy. But I'm not gonna not do PBIS in my building. You know what I'm saying? Or I'm not gonna make sure that the kids aren't having, so to me, it frames the focus because our work is this big. And to Ryan's point, then we're back to doing tasks. Tasks of aligned by design and everything we want to list that we're doing, but this should help focus our work.
How different? I remember in the fall, one of the things that I believe we asked to see like what our buildings doing because our role was really you're supporting building work, and so if buildings are all over the map in what their goals are, their high leverage practices were. Yeah, it was going to be difficult for us to navigate that work. And so I'm wondering if that might be beneficial to go back and reflect. I know that like when we created our department goals, most of us went and talked to buildings and said, here's my goal, does it align with what your work is? Here's my goal, does it align? But I feel like somehow that's gotten a little fuzzy. My work seems like my work. And it doesn't always feel like it's connected to building work, or it sometimes maybe feels like you're doing two separate things. That maybe that needs to be more connected for our role to really be this well. Maybe that's that.
Remember sale number one. I don't remember the first goal. Sale. I said them quick. Problem identification.
Oh, right.
What's two?
Theory of action.
I had a conversation about that yesterday, in fact, with an AP about the building goal, and that's we speak that language every day, and then the teachers have 5 minutes in between classes where they might think about that first split second. So I'm thinking about this every day, and how do I simplify that? But also, I support 8 buildings, and yes, I know that we're all literacy focused, and the work that we do, and the work that we do is also very literacy focused, maybe not in the exact same way or what and how. But yeah, how to simplify that so I don't have to keep track of 8 different buildings with 8 different SIPs, and then making sure that every time I come together with this group that we're feeding right back into that. Yeah, it's supposed to be that way. And so how do I connect what I'm doing or trying to accomplish with not what I'm doing, but how do we as a team connect that back to buildings so that we make those connections that we were talking about, so it's not building,
Now I have to do
departments, right.
That's another, I mean, if you write down another list of a problem identification, that was a huge one. Who was the math teacher last year? I can't remember her name. She said so. I shouldn't say names very loud. But she had said a PD day was coming and she was looking at the map and didn't quite know what to do and thought like, well, my building I should do this, and with my department I should do this, and my PLC was this, and my SLO was that, and it was like why wasn't that? And that's part of our goal is to be like, if you're a math teacher, it shouldn't matter, you know, what your principal's saying versus what your coordinators. I mean, somehow we've got to coordinate that conversation to be they're answering to a main thing and that's staying somewhat consistent. And if they're seeing new things come at them, and that's where I always kind of chuckled at iPads, which was they're here, they should be helping you do the main thing you're doing, and you should be able to absorb it in a way that you're doing your main thing. But it became this like stop other stuff and do it. And so I think that's what we have to be mindful of is if people are getting those mixed messages, think about like, why are people getting mixed messages? Am I another messenger in their life? Is my email supportive of the other messages they're getting? Do we get other people to stop sending messages to send one together? Or this frantic pace that teachers are getting hit at is
I think that we as leaders, as your child, can always do an adequate job of looking real person. There's no make those connections and more regular with people, so that we can talk them down from that. Yes. So when you're walking up and learning, there's really no different process of ADD with the process of literacy. Like it's the same kind of work, there's just different pathways.
Right.
Like there's a lot of these people that really want to go. But being involved in K-12 with both of these two, it's a crisis. People feel like they have some things to do rather than have the things to do and somebody can do this thing. But how to empower the teachers that she's not going behind this thing, or the assistant principal who's out there and listening, and like maybe give her own parameters regarding safeguarding self-care and they can help relax the confidence.
I think that relaxed word and the 20 things to do, that'll be the first slide you'll see at SAIL, which is you have all these things on top of you, and it causes reasons to keep things from coming at you, even if it's something good. You're just like,
Too much.
and I think as part,
It's really, we're all on the same spot and everybody's different input, but really when you step back and it's the same work.
if we can have time to have people see that, is that whole thing, do people believe in PD, or is it a thing that they have been forced to attend for years? Is it another thing on their plate? Is it are these goals another thing, or do they really celebrate them? And that's that whole notion of going really slow with the group. I also feel like the job, this is a side note, but the job I think has changed so much that it doesn't have an ending point. It was okay 10, 15 years ago to teach a solid week and be tired at the end of the week, but know the job well done, right? It was PBR time or whatever. But that, because our function was to provide instruction and we did a really good job at it. And now our job is to ensure learning for all. And you see people that are doing things around the clock to ensure all learners get it, intervene like crazy. It's no longer my job is to teach 6 of 8, the bell rings. It's to ensure learning for all. And there's a constant pressure. I hear more teachers talking about the ongoing demands. And I think part of our work then is to help people find things to celebrate, which is the incorporation of some strategies, or to look at data. The fact that we have no data in our system really doesn't surprise me that we don't take time to actually celebrate a job well done, because we have a job well done happening places, but people don't even have data organized enough to say, wow, our 7th grade team this year rocked it. Scores went up twice as much as they went up last year. That should be somewhere in a headline at semester and at the end of the year for our teachers. Enough so that it becomes a culture of that effort was awesome. And if it goes down, that should be somewhere in a headline that people should be like, we got to figure this out. But there's a reason behind it other than like you're just asking them to work harder on this, or it's an initiative. It really has to do with like, did we get some of the results we want? That's where I hope with this new dashboard coming in. Todd put out an interesting memo yesterday about 8th grade literacy. There you go, Rachel got it.
I saw that one.
Yeah, but there is a reality behind that, in that only 35% of our kids at 8th grade are career and college ready or proficient and advanced. So 65% of our kids leaving the middle school are not really necessarily marketed. And the question is, I said, Todd, don't be afraid to put that number out there with this conversation, because that's a real number and this is a real conversation versus just now we're doing workshop in 8th grade. And I think sometimes both ways we have to have that, but we also have to have it in a calm way that's not as finger at people. It's just sort of like, here's why some of our literacy frameworks this summer. I don't know if there's a lot of deep why as to why that PD was there, and that keeps people into, oh, we have to go there, versus, well, we're trying to move the needle on some things. But then if we start it with we want to move the needle and we don't take time to show where the needle moved, we lose that sense of saying, thank you so much for your commitment, and you're going to these sessions and planning with PD because we bumped it a percent or two.
Tied with that is that not also, we have 8 buildings, I don't have 8 buildings, so, but it's like, the goal is the goal. I feel like Bruce and I and Linda, we have the goal, but it's, what one building may need one day is different than another building, so we focus our work, it's still the goal, but that we're shifting who needs help in this area, who needs help in that area to achieve the goal. Is that another way to help focus it and tie it all together?
I think sometimes the goal, establishing what that goal is, at least in my land, seems to be establishing it is the, like what you just said, Ryan, 35% are graduating, right now, 3 out of every 10 roughly. That can frame, I think, what the goal is. But then how that, like you said, like, okay, well, when I go to West and say that, well, we are higher than 3 out of every 10. We're at this. Or when, and like navigating it in each building looks different. And I think that's just maybe a learning curve for us. Like, how do you know what each building needs? Like you said, you and Bruce have that down. I think that for us is maybe a huge learning curve. Like,
How to support it.
yeah,
Have that conversation yesterday.
because
We're in
it seems like
different
everybody
places
is in a different place.
Well, there's a really obvious thing, is the question, right? The phase 1 is like getting this stuff in your hands. Phase 2 is getting comfortable with it. Phase 3 is being comfortable with it. But I think everything you do, like Sharon, you're telling me phase 1 of like, oh, we have to build curriculum. Like, that's phase 1 in some way, but helping people to understand this, that's the tools we can do to say, this is the phase we're in at this point. So that particular design process that we talked about, like what phase are you in it? That's important because now it's not that we did 6 streets of writing and now it's not. We're just in a different phase of 6 streets of writing. We're at a different phase of literacy. Because the reality is we're not going to have all, maybe, but I would guess 2 years from now, literacy is not going to be part of every single conversation we talk about because we could be at a different phase where it's starting to like be what we do and not really about strategy. We talked about Waukesha 1 going away. Like that title needs to go away at some point. You need to be in an invisible phase, but it doesn't mean technology in a way. But how do we communicate that we're in a different phase so that it's not about us? Probably just think about that because we're changing leadership. Then suddenly, well, we can do that.
A couple of things quick on that. You used the word they a couple of times. I would ask us on that, which is if we're still, are our goals operating on a they platform as well? Which is a great article. I can send this to you. It just continues to ask, what is the role of central office? It was in the New York Times. It just talked, is our job to make decisions, provide resources, or is our job to create stability or to be a consultant place? Or I mean, it kind of really questions that. So I don't mean to jump on that, but I mean I would jump on it all the time because I do always hear this building referred to as things, or Todd referred to as like, are we a lid on things? Are we the off on switch for yes? Are we the yes no place? Or are we a spot that's, empowering a team or encouraging this, and I always wonder about that because that's that question. Like, are people going to, in some places you see people just go despite us because they're just going, it's the right thing to do for kids. And in other places you see people that point the finger and say, well, they said, or they didn't say. And I think about that with some of our work. You see it, you saw the waves, and the early waves were going and the later waves were waiting. I think that's a piece to question too. I just want you guys to think about that for a second, because I heard early on when I asked for goals and plans was that I didn't show anybody what I wanted. I heard that. I didn't. I heard that a lot. Brian, what do we want? What does it look like? What does it need to look like? What is it? Show me. All of a sudden, I'd have been working harder, and I held off on that one as long as I could, and I just started asking, what do you think a school plan is? what do you have one? And then remember Jason brought one in. So there's a lot of West Dallas model in the models that you can see at the middle school. Why? Because he brought an example in and then people kind of copied some of the approaches. And then Jody had a model and Joe Russell had a model, I think from TOSA. And then it was like, okay, my job was to get those in front of people and share them. So we put them in binders and made them visible. And I said, you can grab anybody's at any time. They're all on in this office and on Mary Jo's desk. You can send your copy. That was a purposeful piece of me not having to work and doing work that I needed the team to do. I needed them to know what it was and to explore it. But it was like kind of that piece. And you might be at that stage too, like, well, what? It's like, do you build rubrics for everybody? Or do you want, and early on it was like, or does one person do it for you? So there's difference in recognizing some of those traps you can get into where the next thing you know, you're still doing people's work for them versus is this work you need them to do? And eventually it'll be about like, what is your class? What is the school goal? What is your classroom data? What is your school's data, your department data? It'll be, well, where do we do this? Or how do we do it? I mean, there might be some of that, but you always want to kind of ask yourself, do you want your teachers to do what is in the boxes that you'll fill in? And eventually that'll become the practices that are part of your department.
I also want to encourage you to, because I could be assuming wrong, but there's a lot of input happening and that like some perplexed faces are like overloaded. So I think you guys, some of you may be thinking of like the 50 million things you have to do, and part of the sale process is honing it down to literally one or two things. But even those high leverage practices, if you have more than two, you're not going to do any of them well. So don't even come with a list or in your head, we were going to share out today what are the things we should see. If you have more than two things, I hate to do the Debbie Downer, but goes up with that, right? I mean, it's not, you need to focus on one or two things and see that through with fidelity. And then sustainability, that whole, we initiate a whole bunch of stuff in Waukesha, but are we at the, institutionalization phase? Until we can pick one or two things and do them well over time, that's what we have to focus on. So I really encourage you to pick those one or two high leverage things that focuses on your vision, which again should be right in line with the site, which is right in line with the district, and we all should be, our arrows should be going the same way.
It took me a year to even get goals in school. And I heard you say, I want to get them, and they don't. I mean, just think of how you might, because it'll be powerful if you get them. I think it started in the year with that versus not. Or if you wanted everyone on your team to know, here's the one thing that we're all about as a math team. Kids showing their thinking. I don't care what it is.
Like I'm gonna put you on the spot, but like share out what were you maybe gonna tell us today?
We have a large math vision. It's hard to break it down. It's hard to break it down because I look at it as a system, a math program, not necessarily an instruction. Okay. So that's the first thing that goes through my head is I have to separate what I want to focus on. We have 6 strands that we looked at K-12, teaching and learning, which is essentially what we see in the classroom, access and equity, curriculum, tools and technology, and assessment. So I'm going through the process as we speak right now, thinking how do I get that down to what the essential part is. Right. And if I think about it, and I keep trying to boil it down, I have 3 bullet points, which are hard enough. As I'm trying to do this right now, I'm thinking, I don't know, it's tough. It's hard. If I walk into a classroom, I want to see students and teachers using the rubrics that they've developed around proficiency to help guide their learning. And I want tasks that engage students and build their ability, and not even tasks, but experiences that help kids get there and that they know that it's getting there. It's hard to put that in a sentence.
So we paused that right there. We just recorded what you said. You have a document that has some of these ideas. You shared a clear vision, in my understanding, like this and this. Maybe we don't know what that means yet. My first question would be, if I ask, knock on 4 doors, math, who can repeat that? Probably no one yet, which is okay. I'm just glad you said it because
Yeah.
prior to that, if I asked that question last year, oh,
Right.
kids doing better. This was, and I would share like that's a lot of thinking and processing that went into that and the document. I know the hard work you guys put in with you and Rose, but we got to celebrate that as a team because you didn't have that when you walked in. The fact that that's there now allows for the next 3 months to operate after that. And I just shared this is a official Baldrige card of a company that does it, so it's similar to ours.
Jesus.
Yeah, I can get, but you talked about here's like operational and focus. You could have your 6 topics just be a topic here, and you could slowly work with a team. Like this is kind of where I see us. Like this is where we want to be, and this is where we are. And you could use topics like it could just be like curriculum. It's clearly developed K-12, and everybody understands where to access it on Blackboard. Versus we kind of know. Versus no. You could have your own scorecard. Like Ryan, here's my 5 things. Here's kind of where I think we're at, and I'm working on this column. I'm working on this column only today, or this year.
The language in the box.
I can get you a copy.
I don't want to self-confess.
Can I Google it?
Yeah, Dana paid for those. I found them in a drawer, and there's all different versions of them. And I've got a school version but the concept from a big picture is it has a key topic, and I just looked at over your shoulder. You have a key headline, and you have almost like a vision of what that means. And it really becomes like, if that's your own math scorecard, think of a page 2, which would be a dashboard that Dina creates for you. Now you got a vision page, like a dashboard. And then that's a lot of stuff that you didn't have. We don't have it. And then all of a sudden it was like, if we had a couple of those, now as a department, instead of binders on the shelf for school, we got binders on the shelf for department. And we're like, that's a lot of work, but it's a lot of help if you're a math teacher to come in and be like, okay, eventually that turns into the next story. It might take a while to get to, we want to see every the rubric piece. You might be like, that's where we're at. Tasks that allow students to reach this on the rubric. It's hard work, but it's.
Well, I'm going back to the comment about the fall and the connections. I know we were maybe in the infancy of like, maybe producing documents. I mean, the fact that I guess we had to produce documents on L1 through 5 is like amazing in October because we've been doing this for like 2 years and we're not there yet. So I don't know what that process was in October, but one of the reasons we also invite you to the quarterly reviews is so you can sit there and say, okay, this is what West is presenting, this is what South and North, like how is my work framed around what they're doing and how can I support that? I mean, you're not sitting there for nonsense, I hope. I hope you're actually pulling something out to say, okay, this is high leverage and this is what we're looking for, so I can speak that same language as the principal. I mean, that's what you should be getting out of it. If you're not, then same thing. You should be in there with the lines of like listening, just listening for anything Waukesha learned. Infused in.
I think one huge celebration this year that I can visibly see and hear is the next step we took in terms of professional development. I know it was hard to get synced in some ways, but I know there's at least some syncing happening in terms of staff meetings or in terms of co-planned PD days or TDP classes. And the fact that you even are running some, or the fact that it's going to be aligned to something on that chart or something you want to see, is an L3, it basically at its highest level. And eventually that will turn into an L3 that building, you can turn to buildings and say, Dave, the board, hi, did you know that I have PD offered for your math teachers at this school? And then some of our walkthroughs, I've noticed that there's about 4 or 5 new teachers here. Then I think that this would be a good thing. Or, Rick Lehman, will you join 2 math teachers and take this class with me so we can help get this vision going? That might be a year away,
Right.
But having that ability to have even having the course reinforces like this is important. That's why we'll always have Grading for Learning as a course and a place to go.
Yeah, but hang on, 'cause I'm going to challenge that because, and I've told Jason this, L3 is part of leadership and PD. So we know we're going through this restructuring with Waukesha for Learning, and we've said all year long, this is the first, last month I think was the first time we ever ran a course. Nobody signed up for it. Okay, because Grading for Learning has been on the books for 2 years now. So, but we have all these pockets of like this, I'll say, proficiency-based pathways happening. So why can't a grading for learning TDP be part of like proficiency based? I mean, you probably have 30 people in there, and then you can't run a grading for learning. So to me, that like our TDPs tie right into that PD, and to Ryan's point of the rolling tide, don't keep something on the books that like is going to be something that was like what they think I've already done that, right? So put, try to support the pockets of innovation that you see happening, and let that help you build your work so that it's, again, not an event. They can take it 6 months out of the year, and that will support your ultimate goal. Overwhelming, helpful, little bit of both. Where we at?
The input from all overwhelming to me. I don't think anybody else. Well, I don't know. To me, like I look at 6-12 social studies English. Input from all, just navigating how I go about getting that is a little bit of like a, I know how I did it when I first formed the first vision. And I don't know that my evidence would suggest input from all. Input from teams, input from building.
On what?
On what we established this year for our goal and our vision.
Is your goal getting too narrow? Is your goal just to, do you have 4 pieces of data that you can go big with that just says,
Yeah.
we're going to increase this,
Yeah.
we're going to raise student achievement 5% on this exam, on this one, and this one. Here's our grade level. Can it just be big enough that?
That part, no, I'm saying like getting like all of the teachers to say like, I had a voice in what this goal was, is to me the part, like how do I go like navigating that,
What goal? Getting everyone's voice is tough on anything.
Yeah. So what the department improvement plan is, it says department improvement plan, the department with input from all established the clear mission, goals, and measures to such. That's the part.
So
the all.
because it says that, and that's like the ultimate vision. You're
Yeah.
hyper focused on one word, and then you're like, I can't do it.
No, I don't think I can
No,
do it.
but
I'm
you know
just in
what
my
I'm saying?
head like, how does that look?
Have you
Oh,
gotten
that's all.
input from some?
Yeah.
There you go.
And is input ever going to be done?
Check. Okay. Right. I mean, look, I was at North for 7 years. I don't think I got input from all for 7 years while I was there.
When's the next time you're going to review that? A year from now? You're going to review this mission and vision and goals annually and have different points for people to put input.
Yeah.
Live in beta with your.
Living in data.
But what does it say?
My goal?
Yeah.
Oh, well, mine is to establish a. You want me to review like word for word, or can I just tell you?
Well, you should know it.
What is
Right?
I saying?
Yeah. Just
To align social studies and English targets for good and to embed common literacy practices across those 2 areas.
why.
Because our literacy is not really
So even possibly, I don't
owning
want to.
it.
And even possibly, is that a goal or are those action steps?
Right.
Because maybe challenge yourself to just be
Yeah.
like, our goal is to increase student achievement or to improve the curriculum framework or improve our instructional work.
But then how do you measure?
And then it could be maybe some of your action steps are our key action steps this year are going to be this, because that would be one of your
Yeah.
like some of the things we're going to have to do is align this.
Yeah.
The thing we're going to have to do, but then you could also and only asking that is because
No,
that's getting into the work.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if it's when you pass by people, Barbara Zink or myself or your team, your team is on a mission to increase student achievement on these 3 exams by 5% over the next 3 years. Jody and I actually yesterday, we wrote down on our own checkpoint for our C&I team for the first time, we will have a 5% increase on our literacy achievement next year. That's how we're getting scored next year. And we never use that, and we were kind of laughing like, wow, it's so weird that we don't use that, but we should use that. But we don't have the assessment yet, but we just put out like that's in our data and results. We're not gonna be all about these practices anymore. We're gonna be about achievement as the bottom line and an increase in achievement. That's gonna be a new world that we're gonna live in. We're gonna actually have that same standard. I said it earlier for buildings. You're gonna have to share where your goal was in your trend line, and you're gonna have to show did it or didn't it. And we're hoping that that might change a culture piece, but that might be, does that enough
Yeah,
for you to
So,
think?
so Ryan, help me a little bit understand, why did you pick Conference?
We guessed right now.
Okay, because that's where I'll be honest, is I struggle with stuff like that, is because I don't know where to start, and I live in a world of goals. I mean, in
Yeah.
special ed, and a lot of times we don't meet our goals because we guessed wrong, and we're really working with our teachers on really using data
Effectively using data.
effectively, because we talk about data, but we should have been using it all along, and we haven't. But that's why I ask, is
Total guess.
sometimes you just have to guess, right? I mean, and that's, you gotta give people permission sometimes.
Yep.
It's okay to guess, and that's why I ask.
And part of that in us doing it is modeling. We're going to put ourselves out there. We're going to say we're going to get it. We can work under those type of conditions. We don't even have the exam yet that we're going to use. We don't have the numbers put in there. We just, because we're in our preliminary planning, we want to have this launch ready to go in June. But in our first meeting, we just said, if we're going to ask for that, we have to. Now,
Yeah, I mean, it was our attempt to, again, model that results-oriented culture. And with our beginning data dashboards that will now have, accessible data, I think it's misinformed to say that we don't have data, because we have lots of it. It's just not easily accessible, right? Okay, so what Ryan's asked is, let's have an easy one-stop shop where any site, our district, the department can just scale in and say, these are the 2 or 3 assessments we're looking at, these are the growth measures, and I can access them. And then they're constantly, you don't have to check 3 places of WISE-anything. So we, Bruce, to your point, we wanted to model, because we're like, do we have a district goal even? Guess what? So, right.
So if I look at this, we never had this live. Part of my goal is that I could find this anytime I wanted. Part of my goal was to be public with our board and with Todd and with the community and our schools, of saying, well, here's our trend lines. And I want to say, if in 5th grade we were at 34, 35, 33, okay, so, kind of down a little bit, I want that to be at 38. I'm not going to be afraid to say it. And I'm going to say, that's my goal. My goal, first, because I think that's going to put on the table that we do actually know our numbers, and we're going to talk about them, that we're actually going to publish them, we're actually going to talk about them, and at the end of the year, when that says 32, I have to take a hard and fast look at how it went down. And if it went up, I want to take a hard and fast look at why it went up. And I think we haven't been able to do that in the system, and I don't want to do it for any other reason other than to say, I want that to lead our conversation. So a year from now, I'm hoping we're able to say yes or no. We did a know your trend line game and some other stuff with schools, and I don't know where we were, some of the basic things. So we're going to go with a basic number. We're going to go with a basic game, because it will require, and what we're really light on right now is organized data, end game conversations. Are we really moving it? And some of our classrooms are killing it. They're just killing it. And we don't celebrate that, unfortunately. And some of our classrooms are getting smoked. and, we don't celebrate that either. And, we wouldn't celebrate it. We don't discuss it. Close the door and just say, we got to figure this out. And I really think those are 2 healthy conversations that we can get to in time in the system, and we can do it in a fair, and we can do it in a way that becomes meaningful, and eventually we'll have schools that might just say, we hit our goal, and actually, like, maybe even hear them cheer at the end of the year, like we really dug in and got somewhere. And if we have schools that aren't, I want to see them come. I want to see them rally around the fact, like, what their next steps are going to be. And we want some support and some resources and some time to really get organized around doing better than that, because we work too hard to have it go down. So that's kind of, so I guessed, I think we'll learn a lot in this phase, but it's kind of like we all guessed on SLOs 2 years ago. Every building just flat out guessed. And it was okay, because then year 2, everybody had a much richer discussion. And they were able to say, well, last year we just said this, and we should have said. And so I believe in 5 years, if we keep this pace up, we could be really clear in our system of what grade levels in schools we're getting gains in.
So,
Videoing myself too.
Don't know if that makes sense, but it's always a start.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, I like seeing your tablets and watch, but I push back to that kind of
on that. If there are many things people make in and literacy can impact, then am I in a better place to put that keyword hidden inside of my career improvement plan under literacy than I am to have a walk one goal?
Always depends. For you personally in your department, I'd have a flat out Waukesha 1-1, you
Well,
know.
I think I was
And
gonna
even if
say
it's the
that-
goal to dissolve Waukesha 1 and have it, but
Yeah.
I would have one because that's your department, that's your team, that's your work, that's your main thing.
Yeah.
But if one of your main strategies in there is to infuse this culture into
Right.
that, that's that difference between. So on a building one, what I see value in, we could say the same thing with a lot of our stuff. And I really don't see it as, I said this to Joe the other day, we do a quarterly meeting with these. So I wouldn't care if it was a monthly meeting, then this was the literacy one, and there's a math one, there's a grade for learning one, and a Waukesha one. 4 things that our system's working on that we want to see infused. In 2 years, 3 years, is the Waukesha one monitoring go away because it becomes less about a quarterly check and more about here are the practices that we're seeing.
And-
Could.
Right. So two comments on that. I look at both of you, one from the Waukesha one perspective and Waukesha for learning with our second sales team. I think they're separate tabs because we know we want to go through the sale leadership process with both of those. Okay, we're doing it formally with Waukesha for learning with our secondary team. But Ryan talked about doing it with Waukesha one internally with you to develop as a department. But to your point, I see absolutely both those things being infused into a literacy strand so easily at every level. And digitally with literacy, rubric development with ACT reading strands, I mean, you're done, okay? But there are also systems sort of beyond the building principalship that we need to develop capacity and leadership in. And these are 2 really big areas. So, does that help frame? Because I
Yeah.
you know,
I just don't ever want it to be another thing. I just
Yeah.
want to distract it from the phone.
And what if it's your scorecard? That read, it's end of the year.
okay,
You and Wendy, Laura,
right,
you and I, like whoever, like behind the scenes, these were our targets. This is what we got. I mean, that becomes that piece of you all work round the clock and extremely hard on this work.
Mhm.
By establishing this, one of the things that I did learn was like it did keep your focus.
Right.
You did have a way to say, look at what I accomplished this year. And in moments where I know the task list isn't going to end,
Mhm.
I do celebrate the fact, and I do kind of probably get excited about it when I show Jody, like, look at what we were doing a year ago. We didn't even have these meetings nor get feedback to people. This year, we're actually focused on goals. And I know next year I'll be celebrating, like, people are using data and they're talking about if they're making gains or not. I know that from a big picture, and that I take a lot of stock in that between all the other stuff, if that's like a primary thing, and that might be a thing for why you have your own, which is, I mean, you want to celebrate the work you did and you'd be like, Ryan, I'm going to take time to establish this vision or what you were saying with the goals. I'm going to have these meetings, and your goals might be continue to connect with people or show people the first draft. Or so Dina's goals this year, we don't have a dashboard. Her goals this year were to start to explore them, to get a first couple of model and explore the concept of data. So actually, she's going to hit her spring target, which is to launch a draft in hand at ILT that people can start to talk about. Our summer goal is that they're going to be somewhat utilized in a quarterly meeting. So it sounds weird, but we'll take that for granted that she's working hard and it's going to happen. But if you really look back, you're like, we had nothing. And then we had a development year, and then next year we'll just take it for granted that they're a part of it. And I think that's where having your own is helpful. And I actually review all principles based on these quarterlies, and I'm trying to do a better and better job of infusing like our walkthroughs. We did walkthroughs today and this week. Those are our artifact looks. I review principal and their ability to establish a vision, talk about practice, talk about PD, and I'm using them that way just because it's almost could be your own, like, this is my own report card. This is the work I'm doing. This is the work that's important. Here's where I'm at. You do some self-ranking. We got a 1 this week on ours. Jody's all, she's like, I don't want a 1 on ours. And it was about professional development.
I got a 1.
Yeah. In professional development, one of our goals this year was to not have us send out the professional development calendar, but to have that be sort of a joint owned ILT document, because it's always like people are waiting for the dates and filling them in. It was still district owned. That was a year ago we set that goal. We're coming up into Like, is that still a district-owned piece? And it was like, yeah, that's why we're a 1 versus a 3, and we still got some work to do, but we got to get comfortable giving, that piece. It did keep us on target, and by reading that again, it was like, there's our work versus that we could have had an excuse why it did or didn't, but we said, no, this is an important piece. We wrote it down. We want to hit that target. So we should be by a 2 by next Wednesday, right? Yeah, I'm to a 2. We know we threw a lot at you, and I mean, that was like sale training and 2 years or 3 years in advance. Yeah, I think the important piece is to know is not a perfect answer. It's not about getting a 3 or getting it right. It's about just establishing what you think your team needs and where we're at, what you see for problems, and establishing it. I mean, literally, my first one was I want to see that there's emergency plans because we made the paper for not having fire drills, and that was 2 years ago. Or that I just wanted to see a goal. You guys are in a great spot. You could just be like, maybe you want to see. You're going to collect those SLOs, or your goal might be to run 2 Google Hangouts for your team during the year, or have a TDP class, or that's enough. If it's not there, it's hard to get those things started, but that's a lot when it does get started, that we've established. There's something. I know Blackboard 9 is a big piece on your mind, the use of it, or it has been. Maybe it is, but that's just, make that a simple goal, which is, I want to establish a communication about the importance of it, or ensure that every building has some sort of follow-up for it, or.
Well, and we've tried to do that in the curricular review process now, so to put that into the process, like as a sort of step, because maybe we're doing this with the cycle document, so little ways like that to infuse it in, so it's not something that's.
And I think this goes to that, earlier, that we were talking about what Blackboard was 3 years ago. Even though it had been here for 10 years, we were talking about what Blackboard was, and now we use it. And so that's the work that doesn't get put into a document yet, right? Like building that, right? Or having meetings last year talking about why maybe we should have Blackboard courses rather than like not getting any traction on that. Like that's the work that doesn't kind of go into. So you look at the positions that you're supposed to do and you go, okay, a lot of other stuff that's still critical. Like I have to build that foundation, but that's something that I put in my document.
Right. Like, so the example of like PBIS, but we're not going to say, well, we're not going to teach positive behaviors here. We're only doing literacy. You still have to have the balance of all that.
But I think you have to acknowledge them that it exists, and when people say, I'm on overload, like, oh, that's the PBIS is still there, because Brian's still pushing on his Blackboard thing, because, you know what I mean, whatever it, like, just by having a document that helps us focus doesn't completely eliminate overload.
Yeah.
One of the things early in the conversation was about making sure that building work and this work becomes simple. So for the primary focus potential of ILT becomes to be the touch point for them. So Dave doesn't have to make sure he communicates that work out to every assistant teacher that he customer. Because every systematic approach to that. When we talk about activity and sending up communications of these systems, how do we systematically, so Dan has a conversation with all of the systems about math, about how to do this. Daily work versus Dan having to try to find time to communicate and try to figure out systems approach to that. Because has been continues to be the challenge of district execution and understanding district work, their work versus our work.
To me,
We build a system, we help build a system for that. You have to answer answering that is
I wouldn't want ILT to be an event. Like, let's wait till ILT so Dan can talk to Effie or Tim, right? I mean, that's what his daily work is. When he's out at West, he's talking to David Wally there. He's, right, talking about L2 and David's office about what their high leverage. That's that roll tide. If we don't want to wait for like, okay, March third ILT's coming up, and let's all have the coordinators touch base with the principals. If we're doing that, we're not doing our work right because we're not out there. That's how I picture it.
That's a valid point. I think agree more, but I also think we can get deep conversations over as it moves to overall skip to the separate conversations.
I think
I just wonder how you can. I'm just looking at these systems.
I know that from my point of view, is I started are going to have to roll out our vision, not only to the principals and other leadership. It's hard to roll out in little pieces and create enough of a force to start the waves. So that's what I'm thinking about when you talk about that. Is how do we force that wave? And it's I'm thinking about I have to bring all the leaders together to talk about math and talk about the vision.
Right.
Especially when it's look at the leaders across our districts towards mathematics. There are coaches, our principals, and leadership all together. There are two out of everyone with math background. So we need a really a big forceful push in terms of this. I think what is a phenomenal vision backed in research, and that's it. Just we need to start that way.
What I would say to that too is, first of all, we talk about waves, tidal waves. One of the pieces of PD, I'm trying to get a concept of a constant rolling tide versus tidal waves in our PD days on calendar. Like tidal waves, people get hit, they're upside down, it's salty, they don't know where to go, it's cold, it's like right, it's bad, and then nobody has time to apply it. But a rolling one, people know like it's part of it. It's a little more comfortable. You can lay in a raft, but you're still riding. But in terms of this, so my first response would be, we can fully support things like that, but not every year, not every 2 years, and not every 3 years. So if your department comes up with a plan, and it's a consistent plan, and it's one of the things I say to buildings, like, don't change things every year. Give people time to have a big enough goal and a focus that you can allow people to get some traction, people to come back to the year feeling proficient and looking to be advanced. So I think, yes, we don't want it to be like every month is this, but if you're like ready for like, hey, we're ready for takeoff, we've done all of these pieces and we want to have some math and we want to say this one time and we want to have a good dial, that's a great, I'd say, evening to put together. And you roll in and you get the math team in, you get some principals and we talk about it and we're sharing up. Those are things I think that'd be important for your department or any department to do. We did it in many ways with different things. I think Brian's always kind of advocating for where we at with Waukesha 1, and we had the planning and we needed people to understand vision and planning. So there's times we can make those calls. I just don't think we can do that all the time. So if you can get to like, here's the math thing, the fact that you've been working on it for close to a year, you just been like, hey, first month, everybody here, there's new, so thinking about, okay, where are you at and what's the stage to get people ready, who can co-present with you, what would that look like? We can easily put something like that together. But I would challenge you to let's have staying power for a couple of years with this, so people really
staying power and integration.
We're hoping but then people get used to that. And and you can preview, here's the work that we're going to be doing, or here's some practice we're going to see. That's a easily thing to do. That's an easy hour at a ILT.
Right, but I'm putting my principal hat back on, which I did this morning already again, and I don't want to come to the table and hear 10 different visions about what my teachers need to be doing, because I know what our vision is, and so I don't want to hear 10 visions and now have to tell them, so imagine how the teachers feel too. Right. So that goes back to that connection piece and making the goals, tie in,
and that's the tough part. It's the tough part.
Yeah.
And it depends on what topic we're talking about. Because like I said, one of my major concerns is across our board, math leaders and our mathematics teaching and program leaders are severely lacking outside of the teacher role or my role.
Right.
So instructionally, I think we have great leaders. In terms of informed leaders in math, that's something that I have to push out and inform them about where this comes from. So it might feel like that, but it's necessary.
Yeah.
It's a lot of, right? And even knowing that reality, what does that mean?
What does it mean? That we have to inform it.
And I think I would say too, the challenge for me sitting here, key as well. It's always remembering in all of that and those visions that are created, the special populations piece and how that plays into it. Because like the middle school talked with us about, we feel like the teachers aren't understanding accommodations and modifications and how to do all of that and how to meet the needs and the accessibility for all of our students to provide that success for all. And so it's always keeping those in mind as well, which makes it really.
I have a last question before I go, 'cause I'm always curious about this one. I draw the donut of where we're at with organizational charts, and you guys are the first kind of connections with teachers, and then to where is that out? But how about in terms of the depth of the knowledge that you have? So you're all unique in the fact that you have experience in your content area and probably a real depth to your knowledge of content and instruction. But compared to your peers in the same content area, and even more so compared to probably principals or people that are not in the content area. And usually that creates a dynamic of like, some people I hear that they want to rush to get everybody to that depth. Other times I hear that there's a frustration that without the depth it can't be led. Or other times it's, there's that piece. It's an ongoing battle. It's there forever. It's based on what you know and what you're going to continue to know based on doing the job that you're doing, you're going to have this depth. And then you're going to have second-year teacher walk in the building, or you're going to have principal who loves reading walk in the building, or you're going to have. So there's a balancing act in that. And I'm just curious as to what your guys' thoughts are, because I know you have to balance that. I'm always curious as to, Rhonda and I used to battle about it when she was here, because it was always like, she had the gold standard of depth for literacy. We'd always battle with what was the practical reality of practice, or what was practical in terms of our budget constraints or time constraints, or I just would love to see your thinking on how you're managing that or thinking about it, just because I know that that's an ongoing sort of push.
That's me. I think coaching conversations, like working with every building has an effectiveness coach. I'm not sure how well this team has utilized that position, but I look at those coaches typically know the readiness levels of each of their staff members much better than I can gauge that sometimes. And so when I think about, like, I always go to you gave the example of some weird show that you watch where like people fall off of things and you know what I'm talking about, like Gladiator and like
American Ninja Warrior.
Thank you,
yeah.
American Ninja Warrior.
Is that a weird show?
Sorry,
Amazing.
awesome show, amazing show. But like I look at, for me, you always give the example, or you gave the example of a teacher needs to know that when they fall, they're not falling 30 feet, or they're not falling 10 feet, like they're falling at the ability to catch them. And I think that the coaches, to me, that's the role that they can play of, okay, I'm your daily support in working towards this big ticket item. And while I might be thinking 3 years out, somebody's in your building on a daily basis helping you to navigate how to get up to it. And I think like that's I don't know, that's a role that I think we probably need to look at how we utilize that position or leverage that position more as a bridge between our work and what happens on a day-to-day basis in buildings. And which I'll let American Ninja
Yes.
clearly.
I think Abraham Lincoln had a quote about you can't get too far out. There's an optimal zone for you guys to be in, or even if you get too far out, the gap widens in between what you're asking of people and what they're currently doing. You didn't say it that way. That was Ryan Brown's version. But it was really about recognizing where your team is at, to recognize the steps you need to take. And I think that a lot of that goes with not only what you're asking, but even the content knowledge that you have on this work and maybe where other people might be. And be that a principal or a coach or a teacher or people on your team. It's hard because most of you are passionate about what you want to see, or what could see, or where it's at. And I say keep going for the gold standard, but recognize that there's value in finding a nickel along the way, and bronze and silver.
So I'm going to wait on our share outs because I think you have some new knowledge today, or some sort of reaffirmations or thinking that would maybe change what you were going to present today. Just have a few more couple of you. So I'm going to give you like another week to reflect, and I want to come back next week and talk around those a little bit. So when you, again, what is your vision for that hallway at North High School? The science, we'll use Erica if she's not here. What should I see in the science classrooms at North High School? And use the L1 through 5 in your thinking. Think about your data that you maybe don't have but want access to, and just go back to the why and just keep it simple. And when we come back together next week, we'll share out what you're thinking of. Because I honestly, I mean, if this isn't an activity for naught, I mean, I'm going to come back and then tell Ryan and Sarah and everybody in your own buildings, I just want you to know this is what we should see. 612, Erica said this and this. So wherever we go, that's what we should be seeing. And then I'm at North and I'm going to say, Becky, just so you know, this is what Erica said. So this is what I'm looking for when I'm here, and we just want to see if there's evidence of that vision happening. And if not, how can we help you get there too?
We asked our principals for that this week. I mean, that's a great example. We did our walk. We're doing walkthroughs this week, every building before we do our quarterlies. We quickly just said, L2, tell us what we're going to see practice-wise. People gave us some of the stuff they've been working on with core and some other key things. But it was important to hear. We got answers from some places. Here's where we're at. Here's kind of what we're doing. Some people linked in like a walkthrough tool they were using that would share examples. So that's kind of one of those pieces. In some schools, we didn't get anything at, and so you kind of wonder where you look. And then you have your own bias. So again, I was at the high schools, I literally was counting how many rooms I could go in without being noticed that I was coming in. Because if it was a direct instruction and kids, I was always noticed. I actually barely could touch the handle without everybody turning and looking. But if there was a nice amount of noise and there was a lab or there was kid-to-kids interaction or there was a project or something, you could walk right in and get right up to a desk and actually overlook and didn't care. It was funny. I was counting the percentages at schools and how many were like that. And then I was counting the percentages and you can imagine, the lower I went, the more I could get into rooms. I got to one school, I didn't even get looked at once. There wasn't one moment where I was interrupting. And I would, honestly, my balance would be like, I would accept like a 30% ratio of, you got to do that. That's a part of teaching and learning. But if your school is at 100%, I never am interrupting something, you probably got a whole lot of student engagement, interaction, and voice. Or if your school's at the other end of the spectrum where I'm interrupting every class, or, door opens and just bright light from the hallway because, movie's on. It's like, there's some interruptions. But I'd like to grow on that concept of what does it look like when you walk in a school or hallway or a department into like, okay, can I sneak in? And okay, is it this? And sometimes it's that simple to start. When I mentioned it to one of the schools that I said I interrupted everywhere I went, what does that mean? Just a question. I asked the principal. And I also told another principal just before I got here, I said, I think I only interrupted one direct lesson, but I saw learning happening everywhere. Also at Banting this morning, I said saw the same thing. When, of just these workshops and teachers conferring, really into the moment with kids and other things. So it's kind of that question, like, what are you going to see if you open that door in a math classroom? It's like, and this is your life. What was that guy Smiley? What was that guy on Sesame Street, right? Okay, then you open the door and this is your life. And sorry. You guys probably haven't heard the guy Smiley's name today, so I want to make sure I dropped it.
I had Magna 5 years old. They had that like nightmare guy Smiley.
Great name. They're goats?
Really? Did you look it up in the dream interpretation book? What does that mean?
I don't know.
Look it up.
I once got headbutted by a goat, so that was myself.
Wait,
Oh, maybe you see the future.
was this a dream or?
That sounds like a good story. Yeah. Let's get more information.
Peace out, everybody. Stop
If you have